I'm Anna, and my own family laughed when I said I was going to get promoted and move out. They didn't know I'd risk everything to make it happen, and when they tried to stop me, I made sure they regretted it. Where are you watching this from? Drop your location in the comments below. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Now let me take you to the moment I realized. Sometimes, the worst enemies wear familiar faces. Dinner was already tense before Claire opened her mouth. I knew she was waiting for the right moment to deliver one of her backhanded comments. She always saved them for when Mom and Dad were both seated, forks halfway to their mouths, giving her words maximum reach. Still living with your parents at 30? Claire tilted her wine glass and smirked across the table. That's just sad. Her voice was honeyed but sharp, like the edge of a nail file. I paused mid-bite, feeling the rice stick to the roof of my mouth. Across from me, Todd, my older brother, the self-appointed king of sarcasm, let out a low chuckle. Do you at least get to decorate your room how you want, or do you still need Mom's approval for that, too? Laughter. Only from them, of course. Dad didn't flinch. Mom didn't blink. Claire's fake laugh sparkled like her engagement ring. I set my fork down slowly, carefully. I work full-time and pay half the bills. What do you two do besides judge? Todd's laughter stopped mid-breath. Claire's smirk twitched. The kitchen filled with that charged silence, the kind that hums like a live wire. Even the old clock above the fridge seemed to tick louder. For a second, nobody moved. Then Todd scoffed and reached for another bread roll, deliberately avoiding my eyes. Mom dabbed at her mouth with her napkin like nothing had happened. Dad kept chewing. I stood up, plate in hand, the scrape of my chair loud and final. My fingers gripped the edges of the ceramic as I walked to the sink, heart pounding. I rinsed my plate too hard, splashing water across the counter. Claire's reflection in the window glinted beside mine, polished, unmoved. They all think they know me. That staying in this house makes me weak, that they've got me figured out. But they don't see the job applications I send after midnight. The Excel sheets I hide in tabs when Mom walks in. The quiet desperation in my chest every morning when I count the days until the next internal promotion opens at work. They don't know how close I am. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and turned back toward the table. Claire had resumed buttering her roll. Todd was talking about someone from high school who'd peaked early. The irony almost made me laugh. You done? Mom asked, not unkindly, but not warmly either. Her tone was neutral, like she didn't want to pick a side. I nodded. Yeah, I've got work tomorrow. Claire didn't look up. Work or scrolling LinkedIn again, she said under her breath. I didn't give her the satisfaction of a response. I just walked out, towel still in my hand, jaw locked. In the hallway, I could hear them murmuring again behind me. Not loud enough to make out words, just that smug, casual tone of people who believe their lives are more on track than yours. Claire with her curated marriage. Todd with his weekend DJ sets and zero rent. Both still leeching off our parents in their own way, but I'm the one who gets the lectures. That dinner cemented something in me. This wasn't just about wanting a better job. It was about proving once and for all that I didn't belong under their thumb anymore. Not Claire's smug critiques. Not Todd's lazy mockery. Not even Mom's quiet guilt trips. I wouldn't let this house define me. Because the next time we sat down at that table, I wouldn't just be Anna, the girl they could mock. I'd be Anna, the one who got out. The next afternoon, the house felt unusually still, like the air itself was waiting for something to erupt. Mom was napping in the den, her usual mid-afternoon routine, curled on the recliner with a folded throw blanket and a soft snore that seemed to echo her general avoidance of confrontation. Dad, on the other hand, was wide awake and purposeful. He found me at the kitchen table, where I was balancing two tabs open on my laptop, one showing quarterly team stats for a pitch I had to deliver next week, the other a list of professional development webinars I'd bookmarked months ago and never had the time to attend. Without looking up from his iPad, he said, "Since you're here anyway, you can scrub the kitchen floors." I stared at him. "I'm working." He glanced up, clearly unimpressed. "Not like you're at an office." "I've been in meetings all morning." He didn't respond to that, just gestured vaguely toward the mop leaning against the pantry wall. "And vacuum the upstairs hall when you're done, okay?" I took a deep breath. "I'm not your maid, Dad." That got his attention. He lowered the iPad slowly, as if surprised I'd even spoken back. "Excuse me." The tension pressed down between us like humidity before a thunderstorm. From the den, I heard a shift in the recliner. Seconds later, Mom appeared in the doorway, hair flattened on one side from sleep, eyes squinting like she couldn't quite believe she was seeing conflict before 3 p.m. "What's going on?" she asked, already rubbing her temple. Dad didn't answer. He just looked at me with that same tired, disappointed stare I'd been getting since college, like my very existence made his life harder. "I told him I'm not a maid," I said evenly. "I have a full-time job. Just because I live here doesn't mean I'm on call for chores." Mom exhaled like this was a familiar script. "Oh, Anna, no one said you're a maid, but you live in this house, don't you? It's not unreasonable to help out." "I do help," I said, heat rising in my throat. "I clean, I cook half the time, I do my own laundry, and I pay half the utilities. Do Claire and Todd do that? Do they even clean up after themselves when they visit?" Mom waved a hand as if the specifics didn't matter. "Claire and Todd don't live here." "Exactly." She blinked, caught off guard by the sharpness in my voice. "You've always been the responsible one, Anna. We rely on you because you're dependable. It's not a punishment." I stood up. "It feels like one." That stopped her. For a moment her mouth opened and closed without words. Then her tone shifted, sharpened. "Then stop acting like a burden and get your life together." The words hit me like cold water. There it was. The sentence that clung to the corners of my insecurity, the one I'd been trying to outrun since I moved back in after the layoff 2 years ago. Not spoken in anger, but in quiet, dismissive finality, like a doctor giving a diagnosis with no treatment plan. My jaw tightened. "I am getting my life together." She looked at me with a tired kind of pity. "Then why does it feel like you're always stuck?" I couldn't answer. Not because I didn't know, but because if I opened my mouth, the truth would come pouring out. That I stayed up past midnight most nights to meet deadlines. That I volunteered for extra tasks at work just to get noticed. That I turned down every invitation to go out with coworkers because I couldn't risk spending money on drinks when I needed a new laptop charger or another overpriced blazer for presentations. That I was doing everything I could. But instead, I just stared at her. In the hallway's harsh overhead light, she looked older than usual. Not fragile exactly, but frayed. Like someone too used to being the center of gravity who now feared the planet she kept in orbit might finally drift away. Neither of us spoke for a long time. Eventually, I turned and walked back to the kitchen table, closed my laptop, pressed the lid down gently, deliberately. Then I picked up the mop and set it upright in the center of the kitchen floor without saying a word. When I passed her in the hallway, she didn't move. Just stood there, arms folded, like she was trying to decide whether to call after me or let me go. She chose silence. That was the thing about my mother. She knew words could wound, but silence could make you question if you'd ever mattered at all. I closed my bedroom door and leaned against it, heart hammering against my ribs. I couldn't let this moment derail me. I had to hold the line. Because one thing was clear now, I wasn't just chasing a promotion. I was clawing for a way out of this house. This pattern, this quiet erosion of my identity. And I'd take every jab, every guilt trip, every weaponized chore list they threw at me, because I was getting out, even if it meant leaving them behind entirely. The kitchen light was harsh. Overhead fluorescence that buzzed faintly, revealing every flaw in the countertop, every crumb on the floor no one else noticed. I was seated in my usual spot at the corner of the table, where the edge met the wall and I could keep my back straight and mouth shut. Safer that way. Mom stirred her tea too slowly, as if the spoon held all her focus. It clinked against the ceramic rhythmically. She hadn't said good morning, not even a glance in my direction. I wasn't sure if she was still annoyed about yesterday's mop standoff, or if she was gearing up for another round. I took a sip of my coffee. It was lukewarm. Somehow that felt symbolic. The silence stretched long and flat between us until she finally broke it with a single line, razor-thin and coated in mock concern. "Still dreaming about that promotion." My grip on the mug tightened. That tone, the soft-spoken jabs, that's always how she did it. No shouting, no name-calling, just slow, grinding erosion. She could gut me with a sentence and stir sugar into her tea in the same breath. I stared down at the swirling black coffee in my cup. My voice came out colder than I expected. I'm close. She didn't respond, just kept stirring. I took a breath and let the next part fall from my mouth like a stone into a still lake. And once it happens, I'm leaving this house for good. The spoon froze mid-circle. Still, she didn't look up. But the change was instant. The pause, the stiffness in her shoulders, the tiny tremor in her wrist, that's when I knew. She'd heard me. She'd felt it. It wasn't a bluff. And she knew it wasn't. We sat in silence for maybe 5 seconds. But in that moment, it felt like the entire house was holding its breath. It wasn't just about the job anymore. It wasn't even about the money or the title. It was about the exit, my exit. For years, they had talked about me like I was stuck, like I was some half-formed version of myself. Claire had her fiancé and brunches, Todd had his networking events and parties, and me. I had a bed in the back room and a growing list of sacrifices no one ever saw. They called me stable, but really they liked me accessible, convenient, predictable. She finally set the spoon down gently, too gently. The calm before a storm she hadn't yet decided to unleash. I stood slowly, making sure my chair didn't scrape the floor. I walked over to the sink and placed my coffee cup down beside hers. The clink of ceramic on ceramic sounded final, deliberate. Still, she said nothing. No lecture, no guilt trip, not even a scoff. Just that unnerving silence, like she was calculating how much of me she still controlled. I didn't give her a second glance. I walked out. But down the hall, past the family photos, smiling faces in carefully curated frames, I paused. And I listened. I heard her exhale. A short, sharp puff through her nose. The kind she gave when something didn't go according to plan. That was the sound of a woman who had just realized something was shifting. Her grip was slipping, and I wasn't afraid of her anymore. That evening, just after 6, Claire showed up at the door with a pastry box and a performance. I brought something sweet, she said, smiling like we were best friends on a cooking show. Thought it might lighten the mood. I stared at the bright white box in her hand, labels still crisp, untouched, store-bought, predictable. Her apologies always came wrapped in cellophane and smugness. Behind her, the sky was a darkening gray. A storm was rolling in. Fitting. She brushed past me before I could answer, the scent of her expensive perfume hitting me like a wall. The living room, dim and quiet, absorbed her presence reluctantly. "Where's Mom?" she asked, dropping her tote onto the couch like she owned it. "Napping again, I think." Claire opened the box and pulled out a glossy fruit tart. "She's been stressed. I told her to rest more. Honestly, we all need to stop fighting. Life's too short." There it was, the performance. She wasn't here to apologize. She was here to pacify, to smooth over the tension just enough to keep things in their convenient orbit. My orbit. I crossed my arms. "You were pretty happy to watch me get roasted last night." Claire shrugged, slicing the tart delicately. "We're family, we tease. You take everything too personally, Anna." That made me smile, but not kindly. "You think I take being mocked too personally. I'm just saying, don't be so defensive." My jaw clenched. Defensive was always the word they used when I dared to push back. When I refused to nod and laugh like the house pet they assumed I was. Claire lifted a forkful to her lips and chewed thoughtfully. "Anyway," she said around the bite, "I'm glad you're still working toward that promotion. I really am." Her tone was syrupy now. And underneath it, something else, cautiousness. She knew I meant it, that I was leaving, that her favorite target wouldn't be here much longer. I didn't reply. I grabbed my coat from the hook and slipped on my shoes. "Heading out?" she asked casually. "Work," she blinked. "At this hour," I looked at her flatly. "Some of us work." She didn't argue, just offered another fake smile and said, "Well, good luck, hope it goes well." I didn't answer, because luck had nothing to do with it. I drove into the city in silence, knuckles tight on the steering wheel. It wasn't just a shift change, I was preparing. Mentally rehearsing every bullet point, every strategy pitch, every potential question. Tomorrow was my 3rd-round interview, the final step. One presentation stood between me and that promotion, and the escape. At the office, the fluorescent lights buzzed a little softer than at home. The air was stale but familiar, safe even. I logged into my computer and printed my resume, 5 copies just in case. Ran through the deck I'd built. Checked for typos again. cross-checked my talking points with the company's quarterly goals. Tighter, stronger, ready. Just as I was gathering the papers into a folder, I heard footsteps behind me. "Burning the midnight oil again?" a familiar voice asked. Greg, my mentor, Greg with his slightly crooked tie and always optimistic tone. The only person in that entire building who saw me as more than a task rabbit. I smiled, genuinely this time. "Final prep, big day tomorrow." He nodded. "Heard about the interview. You're ready?" "I hope so." He reached into his coat pocket and handed me a sealed envelope. "What's this?" "Something I should have written weeks ago," he said, then smiled. "Just in case they need more convincing." I opened the envelope slowly. It was a letter of recommendation, glowing, sharp, unapologetically confident. My eyes stung. Greg clapped me on the shoulder. "They'd be stupid not to hire you, and if they don't, we'll find something better." I couldn't speak. I just nodded, clutching the letter like a lifeline. For the first time in days, I felt something break through the cloud of stress. Hope. Not the fragile kind that shatters under pressure, but the stubborn kind that refuses to die. The kind that turns into fuel. I left the office with the folder in one hand and my car keys in the other, heart lighter than it had been in weeks. Back at home, Claire was gone. The pastry box still sat on the counter, its contents barely touched. The kitchen light was off. The air felt heavier again, but I didn't mind. I had what I needed. And tomorrow I was going to change everything. I came home focused, mind sharpened like a blade, replaying interview answers in my head. It was almost midnight, and the street outside our house was unusually quiet. Even the neighbor's dog had finally given it a rest. I stepped through the front door as quietly as I could. The lights were off, just a faint glow from the kitchen nightlight down the hall. The kind of eerie stillness that suggested everyone had gone to bed, or were pretending to. My bag felt heavier than usual as I carried it into the living room, already thinking about my final prep. The click of my bedroom door closing behind me felt like sanctuary. I sat down, powered up my laptop, and froze. The screen didn't greet me with my usual dashboard, just a login page. Strange, I typed my password. Incorrect. I tried again carefully. Incorrect. My chest tightened. I clicked the forgot password link. The system didn't recognize my email. Panic crept in slowly like smoke under a door. I reached for my phone, thumbs shaking as I tapped open the LinkedIn app. Blank, not blank like loading, blank like wiped. No profile photo, no work history, no connections. "No recent activity found," it read in gray text at the bottom. I blinked, refreshed the page. Nothing. "What the hell?" I whispered. I stared at the screen as if it might offer me an explanation, an accidental logout, a temporary glitch, but my stomach was already twisting. Someone had tampered with it. No one else had my login, no one at work would have touched it, and I hadn't used any public computers. I always locked everything. Unless... No, that couldn't be real. But the memory hit fast. Claire, earlier that evening, setting down her tote bag, leaving it near my laptop, wearing that glossy smile like armor. She'd said she wanted to lighten the mood. God, my hand flew to my mouth. I closed my eyes and tried to breathe, but it felt like I was falling, fast and silent. I grabbed my phone and opened my texts, scrolled to Claire. My thumbs hovered, unsure how angry to be yet. Then I typed, "Did you mess with my LinkedIn?" I stared at the message for a moment before hitting send. It felt surreal, accusing my own sister, but deep down I already knew. The typing indicator popped up almost instantly. Then her reply, "What are you talking about?" No punctuation, no clarification, just vague enough to be slippery. I sat frozen for a moment, rereading her message. My heart was thudding so loud it made my teeth ache. She knew exactly what I was talking about, and she wanted me to doubt myself, just like Mom always did, just like everyone in this house had trained me to do since I was old enough to have an ambition of my own. This wasn't a prank. This wasn't a joke. It was sabotage. Someone wanted me to fail tomorrow. Claire had always played nice with a dagger behind her back, but this was war. I pushed my chair back and paced the room, fingers in my hair, trying to think. What could she have accessed? What could she have deleted? Would it look suspicious to the interview panel if my account had been altered right before the final round? This was my professional identity. My resume, my endorsements, my entire work history, all of it was there. And now it was gone. I stared at my laptop again, hands trembling. I opened a browser and began trying recovery options. Nothing was working. Every password I tried was rejected. Every reset attempt rerouted me in a circle. I looked around the room as if somehow I'd find an answer in the shadows. All I saw was the truth. I was alone in a house that didn't want me to succeed. The living room was dim, the only light coming from my laptop screen and the blinking modem on the side table. I curled up on the couch, knees tucked under me, robe wrapped tight like a shield against what was now crawling in under my skin. I hadn't moved in hours. Screens open everywhere, LinkedIn, Gmail, customer support, browser tabs multiplying like panic. Everywhere I turned, the answer was the same. No access. No recognition. No trace. I tried my backup email. Nothing. I dug through my inbox, looking for old verification links. Dead. Even the recovery questions looked unfamiliar. What was your first pet's name? I never had a pet. Someone had changed everything. Claire, it had to be Claire. I leaned my head back against the cushions and stared at the ceiling, blinking hard. My eyes burned. My chest felt tight, as if there was a weight on it I couldn't lift off. Every time I tried to breathe deep, it came out shallow and shaky. I opened another support tab. The little chat box blinked. Thanks for your patience. An agent will be with you shortly. I'd been waiting 42 minutes. I refreshed the page. Nothing. My thumb hovered over my phone. I thought about calling Greg, thought about admitting what had happened. But I couldn't do it. Not yet. Not with my voice ready to crack into 1,000 pieces. Not when I still had hope I could fix it before morning. Because if I couldn't know, I couldn't go there. I closed my eyes, whispering to no one, "You're my whole career." This account wasn't just a social profile. It was my reputation, my credibility, my entire timeline of growth and hustle and sacrifice. It held every project, every milestone, proof that I hadn't wasted my years in this house, proof I'd built something on my own. And now it was gone, or almost gone, because I wasn't giving up. I clicked back into the chat. "You are now connected with tech support, Sandra." My heart leapt. Me, hi Sandra. Someone hacked my account. I think they changed my email and recovery options. I really need to get back in. Her response came slower than I wanted, but it was clear. "Sandra, I can help you verify your identity and begin recovery. Please answer the following security questions." I practically exhaled an entire breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. One by one, I followed her prompts. Uploaded a scan of my ID. Verified the last 4 digits of a payment method I hadn't used in a year. Recalled obscure details from profile edits I barely remembered making. My eyes throbbed. My head ached. My back hurt from sitting hunched for hours. Still, I typed. Clicked. Waited. And finally, "Sandra, we've sent a reset link to your original email address. You should now have access to begin recovery." I scrambled to open my inbox, hands shaking, and there it was. A miracle disguised as a hyperlink. I clicked it, entered a new password, and I was in, just like that. The old dashboard still there. My profile picture slightly pixelated but beautiful, my work history, my endorsements, my contacts. A small sob escaped me, quiet and broken. I leaned forward and pressed my forehead to the edge of the keyboard, exhausted, shaken, relieved. My phone buzzed on the table. Another text from Claire. "Hey, is everything okay? You were kinda weird earlier." I didn't reply. I powered down the laptop gently, like setting down something fragile. Then I whispered into the silence, "Okay, I've still got this." And I did, just barely. But I did. The morning light was unforgiving, too bright, too loud, too everything. I blinked against it as I stood in front of my closet, holding a blouse that probably should have been ironed days ago. My eyes were bloodshot, my head was heavy, and one of my fingernails was split halfway down from yanking open a jammed drawer hours earlier. I'd wrapped it in a Band-Aid, but it throbbed in time with my heartbeat. I looked like I hadn't slept because I hadn't, but I was going. I buttoned the blouse slowly, wincing as the fabric pulled over my aching shoulder. The blazer didn't quite sit right, and the pants had faint wrinkles across the thighs. Nothing about me felt crisp or composed. And yet, as I stood in the mirror, there was something undeniable in my reflection. A stillness. A fire. The kind of strength that doesn't scream, but smolders. In the car, I cranked the windows down and let the cold November air slap me awake. My hand gripped the wheel tighter than usual. No music, no news, just silence and the sound of my own breath, steadier than it had any right to be. The office tower loomed as I pulled into the lot. For a split second, I considered turning around. But then I thought about the nights I stayed up rewriting that proposal, about the time I had to fake a smile through dinner while my siblings mocked my ambition, about the dozens of moments when giving up would have been easier. But I didn't. Not then. Not now. Inside the building, everything felt a little too glossy. Polished shoes squeaked against the lobby floor. The receptionist smiled like she didn't see the war I'd just crawled out of. She handed me a visitor badge and said, "Take the elevator to 12. Boardroom B." I nodded and walked toward the mirrored doors, pulse pounding so loudly I could hear it in my ears. 12 floors up, I stepped into the room with my chin up, my resume in hand, and my bandaged finger tucked discreetly against my palm. The VP, a tall woman in a red blouse with silver-rimmed glasses, greeted me with a firm handshake. "Anna, welcome. We're looking forward to your presentation." "Thank you," I said, voice clear, despite the exhaustion pooling behind my eyes. As I plugged in the laptop and pulled up my slides, I saw it, the look of recognition. She'd read my resume. She'd read Greg's letter. She was curious. Good, let her be. The first slide lit up the screen. A calm fell over me, not fake, not forced, but earned. The same way soldiers stand still after the last battle cry. My voice didn't shake. My hands didn't fumble. I delivered the presentation like I had nothing left to lose, because in a way I didn't. I spoke with conviction, paused where it mattered, answered follow-ups like someone who'd lived in the bones of this job for years. When it ended, there was a quiet moment where the panel exchanged glances. The VP nodded slowly, one brow raised, not in skepticism but in impressed curiosity. She leaned forward and said, "We'll be in touch very soon." That was it. I gathered my things with steady hands and walked out. As I stepped into the elevator, my phone buzzed. Claire, again. I stared at the screen at the preview of her message. "Did you get to your little interview?" Little. The word snapped something sharp in me. I was already halfway to her condo when I decided I wouldn't let it sit, not this time. Claire opened the door with a surprised smirk. "Wow, look who survived LinkedIn Armageddon." I didn't smile, I didn't blink. "I aced it," I said, her smirk faltered. "Did you now?" I leaned forward just slightly. "Nice try with the sabotage, but I got in, I presented, and I nailed it." Claire's laugh was too light. "You think I hacked you? I barely remember my own passwords." "Glitch in the system, maybe?" I echoed her last vague text. Her mouth twisted into something that might have been a grin, except her eyes weren't smiling. "You always were a little dramatic, and you always underestimated me." For a second, neither of us moved. Then I turned and walked away, letting the silence behind me say the rest. The house was unusually quiet when I got home, but not in a peaceful way. More like that eerie stillness you feel just before a power outage. A pause where everything seems slightly off. I closed the door gently, dropped my keys into the bowl, and listened. No TV, no footsteps upstairs, no dishes clinking in the sink, just whispers. Low voices from the kitchen, not loud but urgent. I slowed my steps, heart picking up speed. The door to the hallway was cracked just enough to let the sound travel. Claire's voice came first, sharp and clear. "If she gets that promotion, we'll lose control over her." My breath caught. I froze, barely daring to blink. Then came Mom's voice, low and clipped like she didn't want to say the words but couldn't stop them. "We have to make sure that doesn't happen." My hand shot to the wall for balance. The words echoed in my ears, louder than they'd said them, realer than I'd ever feared. This wasn't just jealousy. It wasn't just family snark. It was strategy. They weren't worried about me leaving because they'd miss me. They were worried because they couldn't control me if I did. And it hit me all at once. Every errand they'd guilted me into, every time Mom forgot to pick up groceries and left me to do it, every sarcastic jab from Claire that chipped away at my confidence. This wasn't family friction. It was dependence. I was their invisible backbone, the one who fixed the Wi-Fi, cooked when they didn't feel like it, paid half the bills without complaint, picked up the slack without being asked. I wasn't just a daughter or a sister to them. I was a resource. The whispers continued, but I couldn't hear the next few lines. My heart was thudding too loudly. I backed up slowly, step by step, until I was in the hallway again, barely breathing. Just then I heard the front door open. Dad. His footsteps were unmistakable, steady, slightly uneven from that old knee injury, followed by the faint jingle of his keys. He passed me in the hallway without looking. "Hey, pumpkin," I swallowed. "Hi." The kitchen voices immediately changed, pitch rising, tone softening. A new act for the new audience. I turned and went upstairs, feeling every step under my feet like it was cracking. In my room, I shut the door and locked it. For the first time ever, I locked it. Then I sat on the edge of my bed, not crying, not panicking, just knowing. It was all real. The resistance. The sabotage. The cold shoulder every time I talked about getting ahead. It wasn't in my head. It wasn't miscommunication. It was control. And now they were losing it. Which meant they were getting desperate. I picked up my journal, the one I kept hidden behind old textbooks on my shelf, and flipped it open to a blank page. And I began to write. Not dreams, not goals. This time I documented facts, dates, comments, patterns. I wasn't just prepping for a career anymore. I was preparing for war. I woke up early. Too early. My body must have known the day was important before my brain even caught up. The sky outside my window was still a faded navy, tinged with gray. Cold light, no sun yet. Presentation day. Everything I'd worked for, everything I'd clawed toward in silence, was writing on the next few hours. I sat up, blinked the sleep from my eyes, and reached for my phone on the nightstand. Gone. I frowned and reached again, checking under my pillow, then under the bed. Nothing. Weird. Maybe I left it charging in the kitchen. I slipped out of bed and padded barefoot into the hall. Still quiet. Too quiet. No smell of coffee. No sound of the news playing in the background like it usually did. The air felt wrong again, thick, like it was holding its breath. Downstairs, I checked the kitchen counter. No phone, not even my charger. I moved toward the front door, confused, instinctively reaching for my bag where I always tossed my house keys at night. Gone. My stomach dropped. I turned toward the living room, and there she was, Mom, standing by the door, arms crossed. No coffee. No robe. Just her, fully dressed like she'd been waiting. "You're not going anywhere today." Her voice wasn't raised. It was low, final, like a verdict. I stared at her. "What?" "You heard me," she said. "Your brother and sister are coming for dinner tonight. You'll help prepare. You'll stay here." I let out a short, disbelieving laugh. "This isn't a request. I have a presentation today, at work, a career-changing presentation." She didn't move. "You'll help with dinner," she repeated. "Your family is here. You need to stop putting strangers above us." Strangers. She meant my coworkers, my managers, my mentors, people who saw me, people who respected me. "You're serious," I said. "You actually hid my phone, my keys." Her lips thinned into a line. "You've been out of control lately. Rude, secretive. You needed to be grounded." Grounded. Like I was 15 again. Like I hadn't been paying bills and managing projects and giving more of myself to this house than I ever should have. My voice cracked from disbelief. "Do you even hear yourself?" She didn't flinch. "You've let ambition poison you," she said simply. "And now you're about to throw everything away just to prove a point." "No," I said, shaking my head. "You're the one proving something, that you're scared of losing me, scared I'll leave." Her expression didn't change, but her silence said everything. There it was. The truth, ugly and undeniable. It wasn't love holding me here, it was possession. Before I could say another word, Dad stepped in through the back door, holding a bag of groceries. He stopped mid-step when he saw us, eyes flicking between us like he'd walked in on a negotiation that had gone sour. "She knows," Mom said simply, still facing me. Dad hesitated, then set the bag down gently. "You should stay home today, Anna," he said like it was a favor. "There'll be other presentations." My jaw dropped. "You're both insane," I said. I backed away slowly, heart racing. Every instinct screamed get out, but I couldn't. Not without my phone, not without my keys, and that's when I knew this wasn't just manipulation. This was entrapment, deliberate, coordinated. I was locked inside my own home, by the people who were supposed to protect me. The moment they left, the silence in the house turned into something monstrous, heavy, suffocating, intentional. Mom grabbed her purse and keys like she hadn't just imprisoned her own daughter. Dad followed her out, carefully avoiding my eyes. The door shut behind them with a quiet click, a click that sounded exactly like you're trapped. I stood there, frozen. Then my pulse roared back to life. I ran to the front door and twisted the knob. Locked. The deadbolt turned, but the chain didn't budge. My chain. The one I'd installed for extra safety. They'd looped it from the outside. I could see the edge of a makeshift hook wedged through the crack. My breath hitched. The windows downstairs, I checked them one by one. All shut, all latched. Metal bars, the old security bars Dad installed when I was a kid, secured most of them. My laptop. Gone from the coffee table where I left it last night. They'd taken the damn laptop. My heart slammed against my ribs. I sprinted up the stairs 2 at a time, checking my nightstand, closet, the bathroom. Nothing. "Think, Anna," I whispered, gripping the doorway. My presentation was in handouts and slides, yes, but my notes, my timing, my talking points, all on my laptop. They wanted me helpless. They wanted me to miss this. They wanted control. Not today. I flew downstairs and headed toward the basement. That space had always been Dad's territory, tools, old furniture, boxes marked with dates and "don't touch" scrawled across them. But it had something more important than any of that. One small window without bars. Barely big enough to crawl through, but big enough. I flicked on the basement light and stepped down onto the concrete floor. It was cold, dust lifting under my shoes. I scanned the wall and saw the tool bench, cluttered and chaotic, with a dull metal cutter lying on top. A bolt cutter. Not new, not sharp, but powerful enough. My hands trembled as I grabbed it. The weight nearly knocked my wrist back. I dragged it over to the window. The bars here weren't original. They'd been added years ago after a break-in scare. But they weren't welded thick like the ones upstairs. Still strong, though. I positioned the cutter around the bottom. My hands slipped once. Twice. I adjusted my grip, inhaled, and squeezed with everything I had. The metal groaned. My arms shook. Nothing. I snarled under my breath and repositioned it. Come on, I squeezed again, harder this time, my palms burning. A sharp sting shot up my hand. Still nothing. I nearly collapsed. For a dizzy moment, I thought I might actually faint here on the cold floor and miss everything. That they'd win. That I'd stay trapped. That I'd go back upstairs and sit there quietly like they wanted. No. I lifted the cutter again, wedged it around the metal, and screamed as I threw my entire body weight into one final squeeze. Snap. The bar broke open with a jolt. The cutter's edge sliced my skin as it jerked free, ripping open the side of my palm. Hot blood pooled instantly. I didn't care. I grabbed the broken bar and pushed, hard, forcing the bent metal outward. It screeched and scraped, but it moved enough to crawl through. I stuffed the cutter aside and hoisted myself up, gripping the window frame with slick, bloody fingers. My blazer snagged. My knee barked. My hand throbbed so hard I saw flickers of white. But I pushed. I shoved. I squeezed my body through that tiny rectangle of freedom and dropped into the cold morning air outside. I didn't stop to breathe. I ran, blood dripping down my wrist, heart pounding, mind on fire. I drove with one hand pressed against my palm, praying the pressure would keep me conscious. Every red light felt like a taunt. Every slow driver felt like a personal attack. By the time I reached the office, sweat clung to my hairline. Tears blurred my vision, but I blinked them away. I forced my aching body out of the car and stumbled inside. A receptionist gasped when she saw my hand. "I'm fine," I said breathlessly. "Just please boardroom C now." I burst into the presentation room with seconds to spare. The VP looked up, startled. "Anna, are you—" "I'm ready," I said, voice steady but fierce. And I delivered. Bandaged finger hidden behind my folder. Pain shooting fire up my arm, blood drying under my sleeve, breath shallow, vision wavering. But my voice did not break. Every word came out sharp and focused, forged in the hell I'd crawled out of. I didn't just present, I performed. I owned that room, owned my story, owned every idea and every strategy. And when I finished, the silence in the room wasn't confusion. It was awe. The sun was low when I pulled back into the driveway. My hand throbbed, bandaged but still raw, a pulsing reminder of the bars I'd cut through just hours earlier. I could still hear the crunch of metal giving way, feel the sting of skin splitting. The pain was steady but manageable. What I felt inside, that was different. It wasn't rage, not anymore. It was colder than that, clean, like silence after a fire. I stepped through the front door and was hit by the scent of grilling meat. Laughter drifted in from the backyard. Todd and Claire were flipping burgers, their voices rising and falling like nothing had ever happened. As if I hadn't clawed my way out of this house. As if they hadn't tried to keep me in it. Mom stood in the kitchen, arms crossed, apron smeared with something red, probably marinade. She didn't look surprised to see me. Just annoyed. "You ruined dinner," she said sharply, like she was scolding a child who broke a vase. I didn't answer. Didn't flinch. Just walked past her, through the hallway, blood drying beneath my cuff. Up the stairs. Each footstep a drumbeat. At my bedroom door I paused. Took one last breath of the air in this house. And then I moved. I grabbed the duffel bag I'd stashed beneath the bed 3 months ago. Already packed with essentials, documents, chargers, a few sets of work clothes, one framed photo of me and my college friends back when I smiled with my whole face. I shoved in the folder from the interview. Reached for my phone charger, pocketed the house key, tossed it back onto the desk. Then I zipped the bag and walked, down the stairs, through the hall. Past Mom, who turned to say something but stopped when she saw my face. Out the front door, no goodbye, no theatrics, no last words, just a slammed door that shook the windows. In my car, I sat still for a long second, staring at the dashboard as twilight settled over the street. My hand rested on the gear shift. My breath was shallow but steady. Then my phone rang, an unknown number. I answered with a hoarse hello. The voice was crisp, professional. "Ana Rivera." "Yes. This is Melanie from HR. I'm calling to formally congratulate you." Silence. Then, "You've been promoted, Ana, effective immediately, and there's a signing bonus, too." My jaw dropped slightly. I hadn't realized how tightly I'd been bracing for rejection until those words lifted the weight off my chest like a crane. "Thank you," I whispered, voice cracking. "You earned it," she said simply. "They were very impressed." I hung up slowly. My reflection in the rearview mirror looked new, still tired, still bandaged, but new. And for the first time in years, a smile crept across my face, slow and real. Not the kind you fake for family photos, not the polite kind. The kind that says, "I made it." The studio wasn't big, but it felt enormous. Light spilled across the hardwood floors in long, golden slants. The windows faced east, so every morning sun would pour in and kiss the edges of my furniture. It smelled faintly of fresh paint and clean linens, a new chapter waiting to be written. I stood in the center of the room with the lease in one hand, a set of keys in the other. The place was mine. No Claire. No locked doors. No passive-aggressive remarks while I reheated leftovers. Just silence. Safe, bright, breathable silence. I had spent the morning moving in the few things I kept essentials mostly. Clothes. Books. A kettle. That one lamp I always liked but had been stuffed in the corner at home. Nothing fancy. But in the middle of the new desk, sleek, white, perfectly angled near the window, I placed something that felt heavier than everything else. My framed offer letter. Right there beside my laptop where it could remind me daily, I did this. Not in spite of them. Not because of them, just me. The signing bonus had helped. I'd finally been able to look at listings without flinching at the rent prices. I didn't go extravagant, I didn't need to. What I needed was autonomy, and I had it now. I made tea that afternoon. Sat on the small balcony with my feet propped on the rail and my hand wrapped gently in fresh gauze. My skin still stung from the cut, but it was healing, like the rest of me. My phone buzzed on the table beside me. Claire. I didn't jump. I just glanced at the screen. Her message was short. "Congrats, I guess." No punctuation, no emojis. Just the barest acknowledgement that I'd done what she couldn't stop. I read it once, then pressed delete. I didn't owe her a response, or an explanation, or a single drop of energy. Let her wonder where I'd gone. Let them all sit around that dinner table, asking what happened, pretending not to know the answer. Let them roast potatoes and rehash old gossip while I rebuilt something they never expected me to achieve. Peace. The kettle hissed inside. I went to pour another cup, humming softly. For the first time in years, I didn't have to brace for a comment, a guilt trip, or a slammed cabinet door behind me. No one was watching me cook. No one was monitoring the thermostat. No one was calling my job a little project or rolling their eyes when I mentioned deadlines. This space belonged to me. So did this version of myself. Quiet, focused, unafraid. I sipped my tea, glanced at the city skyline in the distance, and whispered into the stillness, "I don't owe them anything anymore." And I meant it. 6 months later, I stood behind the podium with a mic clipped to my collar and a room full of strangers watching me. Not just watching, listening. The banner behind me read, "Women in STEM, Voices That Matter." My name was printed on the program. Bold. Centered. Ana Rivera, Senior Strategy Lead, Price Tech. If you told me a year ago I'd be here, I would have laughed or cried or both. But here I was. Hair pulled back, blazer crisp, hand-heeled. Not perfect. Not bulletproof, but whole. I took a breath and looked out at the sea of young faces, students, interns, first-year engineers. Some looked like I did once. Quiet, curious, careful, trying to figure out how to belong in rooms that were never designed for them. The moderator smiled at me gently. "You've had quite a journey. What advice would you give to women who feel stuck or unsupported, especially by those closest to them?" I paused, not for drama, not to collect my thoughts, but because the truth was heavier than it looked. I leaned into the mic, voice steady. "Sometimes," I said, "your biggest obstacle isn't a lack of opportunity or skill, it's the people closest to you who don't want you to change, who feel safer when you're small." A hush fell over the room. "I spent years trying to shrink myself to fit a family narrative," I continued. "One where I stayed convenient, available, predictable. But that version of me, she wasn't growing. She was surviving." I glanced down at my notes, but I didn't need them. "I want you to know, if you're feeling trapped, if you're being told your dreams are too much or unrealistic, you're not wrong for wanting more." I looked up, met as many eyes as I could. "You're not selfish for wanting peace or ambition or both." There was a silence. The good kind, the "I heard you" kind. I ended with one more truth, the one I'd waited years to say out loud. Dignity is always worth fighting for. Applause rose slowly, then spread. Not loud, but warm, earnest. The kind of applause you feel more than here. I stepped down from the stage and returned to my seat as other panelists spoke, but in my heart I'd already said what I came to say. After the session ended, a college student with dark curls and nervous hands came up to me. "Your story, it sounded like mine," she said. I smiled. "Then I hope you know how strong you already are." She nodded, blinking fast. I watched her walk away, shoulders a little straighter than before. And just like that, I felt something I hadn't even realized I was missing. Seen. Not tolerated, not placated, but seen, respected, free, and that freedom, it wasn't loud, it wasn't flashy. It was a quiet morning in a studio apartment. It was the sound of my own name spoken with pride. It was a locked front door that only I had the key to. It was this moment, full circle, and I wasn't going back, not ever again.